Everyone, make yourselves comfy. Come join on in. We're looking to have a very great session today with Fred. It's been about a month since we had our last session, and if y'all remember Betsy, she totally killed it, right? Betsy not only had a great session, I think about four people from that session took her tips on how to actually use LinkedIn, and within a week they started trending on LinkedIn. It was incredible. And so we got to obviously keep that thunder going. And I asked Betsy, who's like the one person that you would recommend that we should bring along for our next webinar? Instead of takeaways, really focus on the to-dos, like tactical things that we can actually implement in our businesses. And she said, you got to get Fred from VentureFuel. And to me, I was thinking, actually, I follow VentureFuel. I actually am on their email list. And I never thought about I should just hit Fred up. Do you know Fred? And she's like, actually, yeah, I work with Fred. Really awesome dude. And so reach out to Fred. Fred came on board. There he is right there. We're super excited to have him. He's very humble, but he won't say it. By far, one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And when I was going through the session, it came from me actually trying to coach him to me starting to learn stuff. And that is very hard when you're hosting an event. It's when you're just listening in like this, you're like, oh, shoot, my bad. I need to go back to doing this. So very much excited to have Fred here today. We'll start in the next minute or two. Go ahead and get yourself comfy. There is an audience prompt near the beginning. And if you stay till the end, yes, there are to-dos that you can do to get something very valuable. So we're going to try to keep that going for every single session that we have, is that we want to keep the momentum going, because takeaways are cool, but to-dos are very important. These are 72-hour to-dos. So with that being said, I'm seeing some people here. Betsy was the bomb from Sandra. Yes, she was. No pressure, Fred. I know you know Betsy. So.
The tough act to follow.
Yes, she is. And Natalie, what's up, Natalie? Thanks for joining us. We find that, y'all, this, you'll see in the chat room, it tends to light up. Feel free to join the conversation. It'll be very fun. And this session today is going to be very exciting because, first, when you talk about innovation, you tend to think about philosophical things. I was so surprised and so delighted when we went through on our rehearsals on Thursday or Tuesday morning. Fred came in with yeah, here's how you can actually do it. And I was like, oh wow, well that's super convenient. So this is the house rules. Me and Fred will be on. He'll be walking through his presentation. If you do have questions, don't wait. Go ahead and just type them down. Gus will feed them to us. If it's something immediately relevant, we'll address it then. If it's something that we can wait till the end, we can do so then. So with that being said, thanks for joining us. I want to give a special shout out to our audio sponsor, Personas, for the snazzy video gear that we have right over here. And also thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kenny, and that's Gus over there. Gus wave, you see him with the shirt. We're part of 368. Our mission is to challenge common thinking so that we can create a common future. And with that being said, Fred here truly represents that mission in his company and what he does. I mean, I found out 2 weeks ago that he was one of the people that launched the Museum of Ice Cream, which blew my mind. Because I was trying to get a ticket. It's impossible to get a ticket for. Thank you, Fred, I guess. But we're super stoked to have you here. So with that being said, Fred, why don't you take it away? Talk about with us today about challenging convictions, how to build an innovation mindset. Take it away, my man.
Awesome, Kenny. Thanks so much. Appreciate you and Gus having me on. It's nice to see everybody. We're going to try to make this pretty interactive. So feel free to throw some things in the chat. But really what I want to do is give you guys some actionable insights around innovation and help you build a mindset. A lot of times innovation is thought of as this big, expensive, sort of futuristic exercise, and it doesn't necessarily need to be that. So let's get into it. I'm Fred Schonenberg. I'm the founder of VentureFuel. I have to also give a little credit to Kenny and Gus. They've been grilling me for the past couple of weeks about refining what we do and explaining it. And these guys are really great on the creative side. So a big shout out to their agency. But really what I'm known for is a little bit of the secret weapon to really big companies to help them find startups and emerging technologies to help them grow. So partnering big brands with startups. When this first came up in conversation on a Slack channel that Kenny and I are both members of, someone responded, Lindsay Slabby, who's the head of Sunday Night Dinner, an agency here in New York, she replied, "You don't want to get Fred, you want to get his son, Freddie." So it is true. I am now better known as this little guy's dad. He does very well on Instagram. He is not an Instagram star, by the way. It's just for years of working on biz dev and trying to be good at social media, all I needed was this guy. He gets more likes than anything I've ever put up there. I will say, though, just realized as I was writing this that he is actually the fourth generation of kids in my family named Fred. So we probably need to work on some sort of innovation around naming people in our family. But he also might make an appearance. So if you hear some crying or laughter, giggling, that is probably not me.
That should have been the first audience prompt, Fred. It's like, what should I rename my son? Like,
totally.
This is all for you.
No doubt. My wife would love that. We should definitely not do that. But yeah, none of us have the same middle name. So we don't have like a fourth or anything like that. We're always switching up the middle name to keep it unique. So what I want to do, the word innovation means something different to almost every person you talk to. So I want to kind of level set on what it means to me and how I think about it. Innovation is applying new thinking or emerging tools to solve a problem. So it is a little bit more tactical than the way some people think of tinkering in a garage or 10-year out moonshots. For us, it's how do you apply something that's emerging, new and different, to your business to make some magic happen. So with that in mind, we want to make this interactive. So we wanted to start off with a little bit of a prompt from you guys. In the chat, can you just write a company that you think is innovative and maybe just a brief reason why? So an example would be, you think Nike's innovative because they came up with the Fuel band. So let's just take a minute, jot some things in there. Gus is sort of the maestro of all this and can kind of play it out. Gus, go ahead.
First one is awesome. Netflix's interactive movies. Bandersnatch, I think, was one of the first big launches, which was a
Bandersnatch.
Unique.
Yeah.
Bandersnatch, whatever. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah. Tesla. Someone said everything that Tesla does.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I think that's a really good sort of prompt to the next slide, unless there are any more you want to share from there.
Let's see. Someone said 368. What? AppSumo was mentioned.
Yeah, no
Amazon Now, or Amazon as a business, and then Amazon Now specifically as an innovation.
Yeah.
ClassPass, Rent the Runway. Yeah, definitely those two. Like, I mean, just the business models were innovating itself, not just the product.
I will say ClassPass.
White Claw.
Yeah.
Sorry, what about ClassPass?
No, White Claw is great. That's one of AB InBev's move into seltzer. So it's quite interesting. They're sort of pivot in what they're doing. Yeah, I would say ClassPass. There's a great How I Built This with the ClassPass founder. That's really, really powerful. It's I think one of the better ones, and I love that show. Well, what's interesting?
Carvana. The last one I'll mention is Carvana, which has been crushing it with their advertising right now, and then also just business model wise. I think they're the fastest growing car retailer right now. It's that business model is super interesting. Talk about
Absolutely. What I think is really interesting, right, is we have no idea what you guys are going to say on the chat. But when you ask for the most innovative companies, two things usually come back. You either see the most valuable companies in the world, you know, the Nikes, the Netflix, the Amazons, Tesla, all those things were mentioned, or the most disruptive, right? The companies that are coming up, that are stealing share. And what I think is really interesting about that is your business can be one of those companies, because innovation doesn't require huge budgets, right? The thought is, oh, Amazon's just throwing money at 8 million different R&D things and Tesla's doing this and that. It's really a mindset, more so than it is money. And we work with companies like the logos on this page, but down to smaller and mid-sized businesses that are really trying to just think differently and get their employees to be nimble and agile and come up with new ideas. I will also say that it is not fluffery. Innovation sometimes feels like, oh, this thing will maybe get to, especially now, right? Everybody is stressed with the world that we're in and our new normal. But the truth is, this is table stakes. Since 2000, over half of the Fortune 500 companies gone. They ceased to exist. That is a seismic shift. But over that same time period, the companies that are perceived to be most innovative are outperforming the market by 227%. So you have this sort of feast or famine moment. Either you're innovative and you're growing, or you're not and you're going to be disrupted. So that's why I started VentureFuel, is we saw this moment where we could take innovation and infuse it into larger companies. So we're a growth advisory firm that builds innovation programs. So we help kind of big companies exercise this muscle, this mindset, innovation mindset, as well as pump in the latest startups and emerging tech to help them grow. Our secret sauce is our global innovation network. So we have over 500 VCs, universities, angel investors, labs all around the world. And what they're doing is feeding us new startups, often before they're public. And at any given time, we've got access to about 2 million startups. And this ranges from dairy startups to autonomous robots to cloned voices. We're seeing a lot. So we work with R&D groups, HR, marketing, and we're fortunate that we've gotten to work with a lot of those big logos that you may recognize. I will say that the reason I put this slide in here was the tangible results piece. Again, innovation can actually deliver results in the short term. We're not talking about 5 to 10 year horizons. We're talking about, next quarter, can this impact my KPIs? All that said, from doing over 100 of these programs, there's 2 keys to building this innovation mindset, which we're going to spend time on today. The first is identifying areas that are ripe for innovation. And this all comes from asking the right questions. So how do you figure out what part of your business there's opportunities to disrupt for the good? And the other is sort of a concept that we've been working on for years with our clients, but are starting to name it, which is creating hyperlanes. And I'll spend a second here on this. This is basically paying attention to nonlinear industries. And what I mean is, if you're Pepsi, you've got a team that's thinking all day, every day about soda and bubbles and anything that's right in your lane, right? But what's happening in the other parts of the world in terms of emerging trends, tech, startups, can actually open up new business models and new opportunities. So a couple examples to bring this to life. I mentioned Pepsi to start. They were paying attention to autonomous robots, right? All of a sudden you can have a robot roll up to you. So what does that mean for a Pepsi? Should they even be thinking about this space? Well, it led to something called SnackBot. So on college campuses, this is last year when kids were actually on college campuses, you could say, I want chips and a soda on your phone. And as you're walking to class, SnackBot rolls over to you, opens up. Well, now Pepsi kind of owns distribution, right, to the college kids. Or think about that in a workplace or a number of different places that it could live. Another good example of this is MasterCard paying attention to this trend of voice first, the fact that we talk to our smart assistants, to our cars, to our refrigerators. What does that mean for a brand when you're no longer looking at it? You're not searching for MasterCard. What you're doing is you're listening for it. So they created something called a sonic logo, which is a sound that plays every time you make a purchase with MasterCard online on your mobile device. And so over time, what they're thinking about, they're getting in front of a trend. Or even think of this is a hypothetical, 1-800-Flowers, right? They see all of us doing Zoom nonstop. Well, what's not happening when we do that? We're not bringing coffee on sales calls. We're not catering lunch. We're not doing all this gifting that was happening in the previous world. What an opportunity for them to look at a startup like a Gifmoji, which is big in Europe and coming to the States right now, where you could actually have coffee sent to people at their home very instantly across multiple places. And you guys probably saw this week in all the press, Lululemon just bought Mirror, with the smart mirror that you can work out in front of for $500 million. That's like a big picture hyperlane, right? That's them saying, we're gonna spend $500 million to hyperlane. Whereas some of these other ones are very affordable, incremental moves that eventually could become an acquisition, but it's more about partnership. So I just wanted to get that concept out there. So today's roadmap, we're gonna go kind of fast and furious. Gus's job is to interrupt me when I talk too much. So there's sort of three things we're going to look at: that identifying areas ripe, right, with questions, analyzing your existing team. Should you do this internally? Do you want to look to an external partner? So we've got a little bit of a matrix to help you figure that out. And the last, I borrow this phrase from Jim Stengel, former P&G CMO, called unleash the innovators, right? How do you pool new perspectives really quickly to enable this sort of creative thinking to get into hyperlanes? So let's get right into it. Asking the right questions. Let's identify areas that are ripe. So what areas should you even be thinking about? We're going to start with the outcome here. You want to find unmet consumer needs. Obviously, you want to find new consumers, and you want to find efficiencies in your business model. What are the blockers to that goal, right? A lot of it is process, legacy process. That's the way we've always done it. It's too risky. We don't have budget. Everybody on this call has heard some version of the excuse why not to explore something. What we're going to get after is some questions to ask to really uncover these areas so that you can then tackle them with startups and emerging technology. But really the first piece is how can you uncover what those blockers are and the areas that are ripe for disruption, whether you disrupt yourself or someone else disrupts you. We've got something called insights in the blanks, excuse me. Kenny mentioned that we're gonna, at the end of this, give you a couple of documents that we're happy to share with you. This is one. It's basically a fill in the blank document. And we found that there's something about that format and these questions that helps you really uncover the core problems within your organization. We did this as an exercise as Kenny and I started talking about this presentation as VentureFuel. So I'm a big fan of drinking the champagne I'm selling and making sure that it's good. So we'll share some of our results from that process too. My favorite question of all the questions you can ask is asking your employees or your customers. Obviously, you want them to be close customers. It sucks that blank. And just leave it. Don't explain it. Just see what comes back. And you want them, the prompt is, give me as many answers to this blank as you can. And you start to get it back from different people. And you find out things like when we did it, I found out that our process of reimbursement of expenses was quite a problem in the organization, which had never made it to me, by the way, before. So that was interesting. I hated doing it too, but I thought it was just me. But oftentimes you uncover things that are more problematic, right? Geez, I wish that. And that's the next question. Wouldn't it be cool if? What's the coolest new tech or startup that you've seen? Blank. And then the next part, I wonder if we could use it to do X. And that's where you're starting to develop that hyperlane mindset with your employees. Start thinking about, hey, I saw something cool, and it can be like a dating app, right? It doesn't need to be core to your business. It can be something they're using as a consumer. I was on TikTok and I saw this concert. Wouldn't it be cool if we used it for marketing? And then asking questions like, what's the most annoying thing you have to do every week? This gets to some of the expense type things, but very tactical. You do that, and then you're gonna get a deluge, right? So we try and get anybody we ask to do this to be giving us at least 15 answers. Fill in the blanks, right? So if you do this across 7 people, you're getting 100 pieces of feedback. And our document will make it very easy to organize that. I'm also very visual, so this is actually an image of me organizing it on my wall, where I put it into different groups by the categories of our business, right? Sales, marketing, operations, as well as started to look at, is this an efficiency play or is it a growth opportunity for us? So I played basketball in college, despite how short I am. I love it. So you have to forgive a lot of basketball references throughout this. But people always think of innovation as moonshots, right? 10 years out, change the world. It's going to cost $100 million to do it. There's also jump shots, right? You're going to make more jump shots than you are moonshots. They're faster. they might be viewed as incremental to some degree, right? They're not as much change to the world, and they're closer to the core of your business. But do not underestimate them, because almost like when you start a diet, you want to lose weight that first week to continue the progress. Making a couple quick wins adds momentum, and then you start to build to this moonshot. So we created this VentureFuel innovation metrics, and that's basically taking all these areas that are of interest to your customers and yourself and plotting them across this matrix, value and speed to market. It doesn't mean you don't do the slow to market ones. You certainly should be doing that, but also getting some quick wins. It builds equity in this process. It builds equity in your ability that it can actually drive change. So we value that a lot of times, unless someone wants us just focusing on the big picture. The other thing is, if it's low value, like, kill it. And there's just no point. I always ask the question, is the juice worth the squeeze? And what I mean is, like, have you ever tried to squeeze an orange and like only this much juice comes out, and you're like, you know what, I could have bought Tropicana and saved that time. You only have so much time. Now, sometimes that juice is worth the squeeze. So what I want to do is show you what we did when we took all this feedback from our customers and our team and plotted it out. What came back to us, and we're just going to look at the marketing silo from our feedback. We don't do a great job of sort of finding new leads, right? So the pushback from my team was like, hey, we need to find new ways to engage with people. And we plotted these all out, and there are not any crazy things here, but owning virtual events is pretty interesting. And then there was things like search engine optimization and biz dev hires that were not for us right now. So we ended up focusing on these three in blue: launch a podcast, innovation webinar, organic social, and this idea of own virtual events. We sort of put off to the side because we thought it was going to take longer, but we were wrong, which I'll show you in a second. So from here, right, we've identified a few things that we want to go after. So do we have the team to do it? And this is for you guys to think about. Once you identify like the areas that are ripe for innovation, should your team solve that, right? If you have a big R&D department, if you have an innovation group, maybe, or maybe not. The way we always look at this is who on your team can deliver results for those core areas of focus that you're going after. And to be more clear, to put it differently, who on your team would you hire to tackle this task, right? That's a little bit of a clarifying question. And I say this, and maybe I'm just projecting my own biases, but I always think my team can do everything, and they can. They're amazing. In case they're on here. What's that?
I'm with you, man. I think any owner tends to think like our team can do everything.
Oh, totally. Like I got a pushback that was like, hey, like I've never run a social media campaign. I had to learn the whole thing. I was like, oh yeah, I probably should have outsourced that. But what you really want to do is like, can we handle it? Should we handle it? Can someone else get us up to speed faster, or do it better, more efficiently? And this comes in this innovation metrics we'll share with you as ways to kind of like score rank it. But looking at those four areas of focus for us, the quick of this slide is like, we didn't have any experience, no resources internally. We did some events really well, in-person events, but we didn't know much about virtual events. And quite honestly, it seemed like there was a million platforms and they all kind of sucked. On the podcast, no idea. Like never done it before. Social media, we had good thought leadership. We write a lot in newsletters and things like that, but like, organic, we don't know. We were just throwing things on LinkedIn and seeing what happened. And then when we looked outside of our walls, right, we were surrounded by experts that were really interesting, but sometimes our budgets were constrained on those areas of focus. Also, you'll notice Kenny is our innovation webinar guru. He also, his picture will come up here multiple times. Kenny actually requires any presentation that he has his head in the presentation at least 3 times.
It must happen.
Must happen. It's in the contract. So this will be the last sort of VentureFuel focused thing. But with this, So we looked at these areas and we're like, okay, launch a podcast. We could handle the guests, finding guests. We could do the interviewing, even maybe the editing, maybe, we're not sure. Hosting, distribution, design, we have no idea. Virtual events, again, we just seemed too much. Let's put it to the side. Social media, we had that thought leadership, but we didn't know about platforms. We didn't have tech. We didn't really have the time to write all the different posts. What about getting images? Like, it just seemed overwhelming. And the innovation webinar, like, we just kept coming back to, we got to talk to Kenny. So coming in here on the sort of the third piece is unleashing the innovators. How do you quickly pool new solutions? Now that you have these areas you want to go after, and you know that you don't have all the internal resources, how do you do that? So Bill Joy was the co-founder of Sun Microsystems, and he came up with this phrase, which has become Joy's Law, which is no matter who you are, Nike, Pepsi, most of the smartest people work for someone else. And the idea is, like, as much as you want to keep it within your walls, the truth of the matter is experts in all these different fields, there's somebody else out there that you can tap into. Raja Rajmanar, who's the CMO of MasterCard, I was shocked when I talked to him, and he said this. He's worked at super large companies for 35 years. And he said consistently, without fail, the areas of the most growth and the best ideas came from outside of those organizations through collaborations with startups. And I actually went back and was like, wait, what? Like, can you say that again? And I thought it was a real testament to the fact that, like, you need to look outside of your walls and find interesting things. When I say that, you may be like, yeah, Fred, you've got this huge network with 2 million startups. Sounds easy for you to do. You don't have to go out and build that network. I would recommend not doing it. It was a long slog. But you can build your own version of it where you can have innovation resources coming. I've got a couple examples here to, again, go back to the fact that, like, this doesn't need to cost $10 million to run these types of programs. You can use external resources. The goal really is to find new ideas that can solve your unmet needs, right? So this is California Milk Accelerator, which we're doing for California Milk, where they're looking for dairy milk in this innovation. Estee Lauder, we're not working with them. They have a platform basically looking for innovators in the beauty space, an open innovation website. People can apply for the opportunity to work with Estee. There's no financial, no equity, nothing like that. Very simple. And Liftoff is part of Comcast, NBC Universal. Again, very similar. So this idea, like, oh, you have to spend millions of dollars. Like, here's the Comcast website. It says, send in your business pitch, and you may be eligible for a commercial agreement, right? There's no promises here. There's no dedicated fund for it. They do have money, like, there's stuff they want to execute, right? So they're not being disingenuous. Sorry, Kenny, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, this is one of those things where there's the upside thing is a little bit disproportionate, right? Because you might have the chance, but really it's up to Comcast. But this is where it's, like, very low stakes for Comcast. So I see a lot of the attendees here representing companies that are, you know, not Comcast sized, but this shows you that you can still have the same level of thinking as we can still go to our networks and pretty much ask our networks who here can help with us. And we would like, we'll still reach out to you. I just want to reemphasize, Fred, like, how important it is for people to know that you don't have to have, like, you know, a couple $1 million budget just to do something innovative. Like, I see our friends and even some of our clients, I'll pick on some, like, auctioneer here, or even our friends at Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's like, you know, you'll have immense networks and y'all can use your networks to really, like, brain pull together, like, some ideas that, like, it's just hard to get internally. Because I find that, you know, internally, if you have a really great culture, that tends to put you in this certain lane. When you can go outside of that, it's just like what Raja said over at MasterCard. That's when, like, that real diverse perspective comes in handy. So just wanted to reiterate on that.
100%. I think what's interesting with Comcast or Estee or even California Milk, what they do is they're very specific about what their challenge is, what they're trying to tackle. And then they're open to any startup that thinks they can solve that problem, right? From whatever mindset the startup's coming from. And to me, what this comes down to is access and time, right? If you're at a big company, you don't have time to go look at the 2 million startups in our network. Like, you just don't, no matter what size business you are. On the same time, if you're a startup founder, you don't have the time to navigate through the corporate spaghetti to figure out who the person is at Comcast that might be interested in whatever your startup does. So this is a way to kind of say, hey, we're open for business. We're trying to solve this. And to kind of unleash the innovators, say, come at me. Like, I want to see what you're capable of doing. And like, make no mistake, the upside here for a startup is huge. They get a deal with Comcast. If it's $50,000, that deal is worth $500,000 if they go out and raise equity, because it's a proof of concept and it's legitimizing their business. So this is a very win-win situation. What's difficult is, kind of being open to sharing your challenges in a public forum. But everyone knows what business challenges are. There's not a lot of secrets these days. So I would encourage people to do it. We put this slide together, and Kenny's going to share this with you afterwards, but you can create your own sources for innovation. It's actually not very hard. Social media, ask for what you're looking for. Make it public. Hey, I'm trying to solve XYZ. Engage your communities, Slack, personal, whatever it might be. Kenny's great at this. I mentioned a Sunday dinner Slack channel we're both part of, and he's very good about saying, hey, we're looking for this. And people look, you've got your network, but they have their network. So there's this exponential moment of when people know what you're looking for, they're very helpful. And then some of this is like master Google searching, right? Like type in startup expenses, right? If you're going with my sort of hilarious moment of like, wow, my whole team hates doing expenses every week. Like there's a lot out there and you have to sort through it. And there's some moments there. But other good places to find inspiration, Crunchbase, TechCrunch, The Information is sort of like TechCrunch, but a little more businessy, Fast Company. I will also say on our website, venturefuel.net/ventures, we release a new startup every week where we do like a quick synopsis of it. There's an interview with the founder, and they're all business to business startups for the most part. They're things that mid-sized small companies and large brands could work with and pilot with. And we also put that up on Twitter and our LinkedIn pages. So we're actively trying to kind of feed some of this hyperlane potential to you guys. So please feel free to check that out. So I want to show how this comes together. So still looking at those three areas, right? Launch the podcast, organic social media, and the innovation webinar. We started the podcast when Kenny and I started talking. So this all happened within a matter of weeks. You'll see the logo for it. We used a company called 99 Designs. We got, 15 different designs back, a couple $100, and we're up and running. Again, we had no idea how to do a podcast. We found a startup called Messy.fm, which it's almost like the WordPress for podcasts. Within an hour and a half, we were ready to go. And they did the distribution to Spotify and Apple and all the places you find it. So very quick, get it out there, make lots of small bets. Another startup that we worked with on the podcast part was called Resemble.ai. This is a voice cloning startup. So literally, it has cloned my voice, so I can type in changes to the podcast and things like that, and it will change that as if I'm speaking it. Kenny and I have been laughing about that one because I had to record it because we don't have a fancy studio here in quarantine. I recorded it in my wife's closet and had to read Sherlock Holmes into the mic in order to get my voice there. So you've got to be willing to do some crazy stuff too. The last one I'll tell you about is Zap Media. We partnered with them. They're a voice first technology, which now if you go to your Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa, you can say launch VentureFuel and it will launch the VentureFuel podcast. Somehow my Alexa didn't go off. That's very exciting. Social media, Unsplash is a group of amazing photographs, searchable photographs. So all of a sudden our social media posts start looking really sharp and professional, all free. all very like targeted to what we're doing, differentiates us. Right Label is quite amazing. This is like a creative writing cloud. Essentially all these comedy writers and creative writers around the country, and you can give them the challenge, the business objective you're trying to do, and they all basically write in with their ideas. So now we've got like a full staffed creative shop that is working on our posts and what we write and how we do things. And then Latently is super interesting. This is a tech startup that is using AI and machine learning to go back and crawl our thought leadership pieces and create bite-sized pieces of content for social. So the idea that we've done all this thought leadership for years and years, it's sort of sitting on our website, and they're pulling out bite-sized pieces to create new content for us to share. So all those startups came together in a matter of weeks. We now have a podcast that has, 40, 50 episodes at this point. It's doing very well, actually, which has been fun. Our social media is up by 170% in terms of all the metrics we would look at. And then, of course, Kenny's photo makes another appearance here because we're doing this webinar.
I think you fulfill your contract. We're good, man. Thanks.
Okay.
For
I was dropping it as we went. But like, look, some of this stuff seems out there, right? I'm cloning my voice, right? Like, is that necessary? Probably not. But once you do a couple episodes and you have to go back and do all the post-production and the multiple takes, some of this stuff starts to become a hack to help you do more faster at a lower cost. And I think what's cool is all these startups, get a lot of exposure out of doing this. There's good opportunity for their businesses. So it's very much a win-win for all of us. The last thing I'll say is I mentioned our moonshot, right? The sort of hyperlane, we want to own virtual events in the sort of innovation space. Being open to what's out there is also really important with the innovation mindset. We were introduced to a company called Live CGI, who went ahead and built us a studio. It is a virtual studio, almost like SportsCenter or CNN, completely VentureFuel branded, and we can do Zoom videos and drop it into this and make this entire tricked out experience as if we're like shooting live on a set. Run the World is a new startup out of Silicon Valley that is solving the sort of networking piece about virtual events, that moment of being able to meet somebody serendipitously. They have like a speed dating networking piece. And Recess actually helps find advertisers for virtual events. So as part of us thinking and looking, and we actually hadn't moved to this focus area yet, we're actually pretty ready to go into the virtual event game, and whether that is for our own events, whether that is for pitch competitions or private events for our brands, that all happened really fast and at a very low price point. If I'd gone to a huge agency or production house and said, hey, I want to create a studio, virtual studio equal to SportsCenter, and also solve this whole networking thing, right? I'm spending millions of dollars and taking 6 months before we have a working prototype. And this all happened like that. So
someone just said, Fred, so awesome, inspiring. My mind is blown. And like Sandra, I felt the same way. Like when he showed me like that slide about like how fast he got that podcast up, but then like he had to record Sherlock Holmes, it still dawned on me. It's like, you're saying there's a startup that does that? I think like these takeaways here that he's about to share is really good, but do not forget like the power of that question of him just going out to his network and finding that. That's really what Fred is telling us today, is that, those answers are closer than you think, and it's okay to go outside your own organization. It's really important to look for that diverse perspective.
Yeah, I'm like either the most interesting or the worst person to go to dinner with. Because no matter what you're talking about, I'm like, oh, have you heard of this startup? Oh, have you heard of this? So I try and tone it down in personal settings. So I have to give Kenny a lot of credit here. Kenny pushed me on two things. One, to give you guys actionable to-dos that you could do within 72 hours. And the other was to give three takeaways, but in short, quotable format, so that it forced me to focus on what do I really want you to take away. which was very clarifying with thinking through the whole presentation. But here they are. And I think they're great. And also the to-dos then gets down to like, what can you actually make happen? Innovation doesn't require huge budgets. It requires a new mindset. If there's anything I can say is like, do not think this is a $100 million investment thing. No matter what size company you are, you can infuse innovation into your sort of ethos. Let your customers and team help you disrupt yourself by asking what if, why not, and what sucks. It is amazing. Like we've done this process a couple of times, and every time I'm sort of surprised by what comes back. And there's at least one thing that I was like, man, I had no idea about that. And usually there's one thing that gets all of us really excited. We're like, let's roll. Let's see what we can do with this. And the last one is startup partnerships. Accelerate your core business by creating hyper lanes of growth. This idea of seeing tech, cool, new thinking over here and thinking how it can work for your business, that ends up creating something where there are no competitors, there's no traffic in that lane, which gives you first mover advantage and all sorts of other opportunities to distinguish your business. So here are your to-dos. By the way, we'll start with the big to-do. Email me. I will send you our insights in the blanks, which are the top questions that you can ask your team as well as your customers. Also send you the VF Innovation Matrix, which helps with the sort of organizing and prioritizing, as well as how to assess internal and external. And then I would say follow us at VF Insights, because that will give you this sort of hyperlaning new ideas. But with all that, what you guys should do is you should put something up. And if you don't want to make it public, just send it to your private networks. Say, hey, this is my KPI for this quarter, or this is the next thing I'm working on. I'm looking for new thinking on how to solve this problem or this opportunity. And just put it out there and open your aperture, right? Like if you're thinking as a photographer, don't look at just like, okay, I need to buy search engine ads because that's what everyone else is doing. And I know I'm going to get 3% return and blah, blah, blah. Like, then it's all commoditized, right? So open your lens to new thinking, create a quick form with, hey, here are the things we're tackling, and let the innovators come and try and get out there and expand the way you're thinking. So with that, Kenny, if we have time for questions, I'm game.
Yeah, we actually ended earlier. And I just want to reiterate, can you go back to the last slide, Fred? The importance of like to-dos, like this, all these remote workshops that we do, like they're only important if this becomes actionable. Look, everyone goes through a ton of webinars. We want ours to be different by actually giving you actionable things to do. So please follow up with Fred. You see his email right below there. And the tools that he will give you, I promise you it's going to be very valuable, because it's so hard to be a host when you learn a lot of new things. And from Fred, as he's going through this stuff, I was like writing stuff down. And for anyone that's doing virtual events, I hope you jot down notes earlier, because Fred, you just shared like a treasure trove. I want to read you some comments from Rachel Stewart. Said one, our CEO needs to see this presentation. We're hosting a hopefully very large event in October, and implementing these solutions would take it to the next level. Thank you. And really, like Fred, what you taught us today, it's really all mindset, right? It's like mindset and asking the right questions. So thank you for doing that. And, you know, as we close, if you're cool, like we could actually take a couple questions. I see one right here from Carl. It says, can you share a rule of thumb for how much ROI is needed to make an investment? What profit do you want to see for a $25,000 investment in equipment, et cetera?
Yeah, so look, I will say the big red flag that you'll run into most of the time if the word innovation is there is ROI. Because it's risky, it's new, it's unproven, right? Everyone wants to see case studies and wants to see what the expectation is. If I put $1 in, what do I get out? And the truth is, innovation doesn't line up for that very nicely or smoothly. So you have to be creative with how you justify it. We actually did a really cool podcast with Jackson Janigam from Clorox. And he talked about sort of balancing your portfolio of investments, meaning like media spend. And he was like, I try and get really efficient on the proven stuff so that I free up some cash to take some chances. So I think that's an interesting philosophy. I will say, to answer your question specifically in terms of if you're going to put $25,000 into something, what do you want to see out? Clearly, you want to see $25,000 of value out. Otherwise, you should not do it. If you can't see the path to at least break even, don't waste your time. But beyond that, you need to see what, like there needs to be more than just breaking even. Otherwise, you're treading water, right? So the way we always look at it is there an opportunity for this to be a home run, right? To fundamentally change our trajectory. You mentioned the Museum of Ice Cream. I literally went into some of the biggest companies in the world, and we had a pitch deck that had an ice cream cone on it. And I was like, we're going to build this museum. It's like Willy Wonka meets Andy Warhol. And it's like, what? Why would we ever be interested in sponsoring that, right? And so we had to kind of walk through what the upside was. And it was like, hey, this is in bottom of the High Line in Manhattan. If this takes off, if this becomes a thing, it could explode, which it ends up, I think they got over 1 trillion impressions or something. Like it was some number that seems false that I hate to put on a slide, for almost a nothing investment, right? So the risk was low, but the potential was huge. So you want to look at each situation and know that if you're going to put 25 grand in, there's got to be some sort of potential for you to risk the 25 grand. Does that answer the question?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, one thing is, if you could go back to the last slide, I think people are trying to take some pictures of the 3 big takeaways. Also, to piggyback on that in terms of investment, Beth Comstock, who we both know is like an amazing innovator. She's always like, she goes back to the basic principles of 80-20-10. Or was it 70-20-10? 70% of her investment strategy in terms of marketing or whatever her department fund is really proven, true, tried and true. 20% is medium risk, and that last 10% is super high risk. So as someone who controls the budget, if you only have $100,000 to spend, she would say to solve a problem, it would be something like 70,000 in tried and true technique, 20,000 in medium risk, and 10,000 in just whatever the hell you think could do to achieve the goal. So she's been one who's helped kind of like change our mindset as an agency for how we invest our dollars there. There's also another question.
Gus, I just want to piggyback on that because yeah, no, Beth, I love Beth is like the chief like change agent, chief instigator. Like she's phenomenal. That 70-20-10 thing, it actually started at Coca-Cola as a creative philosophy. And it was now, new, and next, right? So now is for the stuff that's proven that you know what the outcome is going to be if you put the dollar in. New is like the stuff that sort of is proven, you've taken some chances on, you think it has some growth. And then next is like you're testing, you're trying things. Google uses it now across a whole bunch of different functions, hiring. It's a really interesting framework for thinking about trying new things and making sure that you're always putting in a little bit of experimentation and opportunity.
I love it. That's awesome. Now, new, and next. That's a cool way to put it. One other question that 2 people asked is, whenever you think of these questions, how often do you say it's healthy to ask? How often would you say it's healthy or productive to ask these questions of your team and your clients in terms of frequency?
Yeah, I think quarterly of your team, no problem, like for sure. You could do it more depending on where you are in your growth or what level of friction is happening, right? So the more you need to do it, I don't think there's any harm. I ask my team, I would say probably once a quarter. With your customers, you don't want to become, no offense to Delta Airlines, but like you don't want to get an email after every flight, how am I doing, right? Like the only time I ever fill that out is when they do really bad. And so their numbers must look terrible. But I don't mean to pick on them right now. It's a tough time for them. But
yeah.
you don't want to burn. You don't want to burn your customers, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful with that. And so maybe even rotating different customer groups that you talk to. You also don't want to end up in an echo chamber, right? Like we've got like 5 like clients, customers that like we are like thick as thieves with. They know us, they love us, we love them, like we're good. we ask them, but sometimes it's asking the other clients that maybe aren't as integrated into what we do, where we get surprising results. So I would, about once a quarter is the max with customers, and you may want to rotate which customers you ask.
Awesome. And I think the one person wanted to know, or as someone who works, so this is from Hunter, what is your advice for someone who works in an industry such as healthcare where there's so many political roadblocks to innovation? So the politics side, I think, is such an important part of this.
Yeah, healthcare is super interesting. It's like banking, right? There's all these different regulations you have to think about. We do a lot with food and beverage too, and there's actually a lot on food safety and quality around the food. So when you're creating new food products, so every industry has their own version of this, and healthcare certainly has a lot of red tape, which by the way makes it very ripe for disruption overall as an industry. So my advice would be very clear when you put out your ask for what you're trying to accomplish, what regulations the startup would need to get passed for you to consider it. And then you need to internally recognize your risk tolerance, right? So when we're looking at dairy milk and we're looking at a new startup creating a dairy beverage, like we need to make sure it doesn't kill anybody, right? Like you don't want to try some rotting milk because someone thinks it's a good idea.
That's a good start.
It's a good start, right? So that's our baseline. But you know, we dial it up, right? And like before it gets out to a certain level, it's got to pass all these regulations. And so we're very clear with like, hey, we're looking for this, and this is a stage gate. You've got to get to here by this part of the process. And for us to really consider this, you're going to need to navigate all these different other things. So my quick advice would be try and figure out a way that you can get fresh thinking that maybe isn't a huge spend or a huge thing where it's really risky. So you can get that in there, and then you find the one you really believe in, and then work with them, help them navigate some of the regulations that need to be there. And if that's not worth your time, be very specific. These are the regulations. If you cannot meet these, we can't consider you. And the good news is there, you may lose some applications or some thinking, but like the ones that come to you are going to be ready for what you need.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. I think the only other question that I have in the chat as of right now, y'all, is if you could go back to the hyperlanes. It's this concept that you have built within your organization and implemented across many organizations, re-explaining hyperlanes and giving us some more context around there.
Yeah, no doubt. So the idea of a hyperlane is paying attention to emerging technology, startups, and trends. So just being aware, right? So all of a sudden everybody's on TikTok. Okay, so you know that's a trend. That's an interesting space. Think about your core business and start to ask that question of how does TikTok play for MasterCard? What is it about TikTok that's special? What's making it grow? What's making it be this interesting thing? And is there anything for me as the head of MasterCard to learn from that or to think about it? And basically what you're doing is you're taking two things, TikTok and MasterCard, which are not in the same lane, right? They couldn't be farther away from each other. And you start thinking, hey, wait a second. If we put these together, what you're doing is creating a new lane. I use the example of, if anyone watched the movie Back to the Future, at the end when he's like, we don't have enough road to hit 85 miles an hour. And crazy Doc Brown turns to him, he goes, where we're going, we don't need roads. To me, that's the hyperlane, right? You get out of the 405 traffic in California, and now you're up here because you've got a new idea that is MasterCard plus TikTok, and Amex isn't up here, Chase isn't up here, right? You've got something that you can own, which gives you, and by the way, they'll get up there and follow you, and you have to create another hyperlane. You guys mentioned like White Claw, right? Like how do you take seltzer, the fact that everyone's drinking carbonated water, and like, what does that mean for a beer company? And like, can you put those together and create a new category or a new idea? So to me, what I do is every startup we see, and we see over 100 a week that we like take a decent look at. I'm looking at through two lenses. My clients, how does this help? You know, Anheuser-Busch, how does this help Hershey's, General Mills? And then for VentureFuel, is there something for me to learn here that will create differentiation for us, right? Like if you had asked me straight up and said, hey, does VentureFuel need a live CGI studio? Like I wouldn't have taken that email or phone call, right? Like for what reason? On what planet would I ever even talk to that person? But all of a sudden now we're trying to think, how do we do virtual events in a cool way that is engaging and interesting? Oh yeah, you remember that company we saw that was predominantly focused on like esports? Could we move that into a B2B setting that could benefit our clients and also us? So a hyperlane is really where you take your business and a nonlinear trend, right? Something that's not in your core lane, and you put them together to create a new area to run.
That's awesome. Heck yeah, I think it was thanks for re-explaining that. I think that's like one of the core ideas to this presentation. One other question is, do you have any references on some of the best examples of corporate startup programs? So maybe brands that have done that program of fielding startups and piloting programs extremely well. You probably helped build many of those. Yeah,
we've played a hand in a lot of them. We were just talking about Anheuser-Busch. I love what they're doing. They have a multi sort of touch point approach. They have ZX Ventures, which is like their venture arm where they're actually investing in startups. They have an accelerator where they're putting in investment in some startups that are looking at really growth areas around sustainability and other things that are really important to their business and to their consumers. And then they have something called the Beer Garage, which is really awesome. We're really tight with them, but they're looking at their core business and like what are cool new ways to create hyperlanes for HR, for production, supply chain, all those things. So I personally believe they're probably doing it as well as anyone out there. Comcast, NBC Universal, very similar approach, multi-touch points. I love California Milk. The beauty of that one is like it's a really traditional legacy industry, dairy milk. And like nobody's thinking about innovation there, right? So that's where a seismic change can happen because all of a sudden now you're looking at Silicon Valley startups and how they can help that industry grow and create new products and new extensions and lines and ways to be efficient. So I personally love them. Unilever's done some really interesting things. Chobani has an unbelievable accelerator, and Chobani actually does not take equity. They're doing it as a social mission to support startups. So they give grants. They give like $100,000 to each startup to help them grow faster. And Chobani doesn't take anything from it. Now they get a lot of learning, a lot of press. So I don't want to say that there's nothing they get out of it, but I think they do some interesting things too.
You know, we have time enough for one more question, I think.
If anyone has anything.
You know, I'll ask like a filler question, and I'm just genuinely curious, is that, regarding innovation, is there any like common advice about innovation that someone that's done it so much should ignore? Because we always hear all the philosophical stuff. What's the stuff that you should tune out that's like pretty much mainstream media today?
I think the idea that it's hard and that it takes millions of dollars and you should create like all these bells and whistles, and I think it can be set up to be really efficient. I think it can actually serve your core business as well as the sort of long-term horizon. So I think that idea is really outdated. I will also say the killer myth is Silicon Valley. It is not the end all be all for startups. They are everywhere, from Milwaukee to Brooklyn to Austin, Germany, London. When we looked at all the pilots that our corporates have done with startups, less than 15% were from Silicon Valley. So I think casting a wide net with a narrow focus is a way to approach this.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true is that you also don't have to have a fat budget either. I think a lot of people during coronavirus too also proved that is if we're going to survive, we better innovate, right? That's when you start asking those important questions.
Dude, for the best thing I can tell you, it's like, think about how fast your entire organization went virtual, right? If you had asked those same companies to go virtual, they would have given you an 18-month timeline, millions of dollars of cost, you have to do all these things. But like when everything hit the fan, everyone figured it out in a matter of weeks. And I think what's great and amazing about startups and why the startup corporate collaboration works is startups, let's go. Like we don't have months or weeks. We don't have a run rate. We don't have budget. We don't have investors. Like we got to go. So I think that sort of sense of urgency and like build the parachute after you jump out of the airplane. That's what startups do. And it's really infectious. And when you can take that mindset and put it into the corporate lens where you still have the processes and all the reasons that those are there, it's a really dynamic combination.
Agreed, man. And with that, man, let's go ahead and close. Thank you so much, Fred. We appreciate your time. I'm sad that Fred Jr. didn't show up. Maybe in a future session we get to see him. This is a great preach of a mindset that everyone should have, because at this point you should have realized that you have what it takes if you survive COVID-19 as a leader within an organization. And like you mentioned earlier, Fred, like during like the rehearsals, COVID was one of those things that kind of just made you realize we need to sow the seeds now, where if we survive like what's going on, like we'll make it way better on like when it's finally done. It's kind of like Airbnb. When they get out of this, like the world's going to want to travel, they're going to make buku money. But what's important is they do the right innovations now to get through it. So that being said, man, thank you so much for your time. Y'all, do not forget that 72-hour challenge. Go ahead and email Fred. There are to-dos. And with that being said, keep challenging common thinking. Live that mission of, challenging common thinking so that we can build a common future. And with that being said, we'll see you next time in August for our next webinar. So thank y'all so much for attending, and we'll see y'all soon. Take care, y'all.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks, Gus.